Okay, I'm going to get started. I think we have a good critical mass of attendees. Hi, everybody. I'm Naila Faroui, the CEO of Arab Foundations Forum, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this incredible launch today. Um, so we have a very interesting kind of launch event planned with some really amazing speakers and panelists who are part of our incredible network. And before we launch into the climate commitment itself, I do want to give a little bit of background and kind of lay the context for why this is such an important and critical initiative for us, and to give you a bit of the story of how we got here. Um, because as much as professionally, it's a really important milestone for us, it's also personally a really interesting journey for how we got here. Um, so to make the story kind of a long story, really as short as I possibly can, um, back in 2017, the F20, the Foundations 20 group, which reports into the G20 session, the G20 was about to be hosted in Argentina. And I remember the F20 group, whose focus focus topic is on climate and climate change, was looking to have representation from the Arab region to be able to speak to what the Arab region was doing around climate and climate change, and to report that into the G20 summit. And so somehow I got connected to the F20 group through friends and other colleagues. And I remember even at the time when the F20 folks got in touch with me, I was like, I don't really think anyone in our network is actively and strategically addressing the climate issue. So this was 2017. So like this is, a few years back. And I remember kind of like talking to people from our network, and everyone had an interest in climate. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not that climate wasn't on our radars, but it was sort of an afterthought. It was something that a lot of us felt or thought was um, more inclined to more science-based issues, or you needed to be an environmental group to be working on climate, or you needed to have some sort of experience working in the climate space. And so we weren't really galvanized around the issue of climate, over and above the fact that in our region we had so many other issues that felt and seemed a lot more pressing. So I went back to the F20 group and said, you know what, actually, I don't think that we have enough representation to be able to speak in an informed way around the climate issue. And F20, bless them at the time, just said, you know what, actually, we're happy to kind of take you through this process with us and teach you a little bit about how you can engage your network around the climate crisis, without being, scientists, without being environmentalists, without anything. And so they invited me along for the journey. And I ended up joining the F20 group and other organizations that were part of that group and part of the delegation that ended up going to Argentina. And I sort of just served as an observer on behalf of my network. And from 2017 all the way until our journey took us to, the COP28 in Dubai 2 years ago, and then COP29 in Baku last year in November, to bring us to this moment here today, which was just really learning and exploring and trying to understand a little bit more about how foundations can be engaged in the climate conversation, and taking us all the way to how can we actually have a meaningful and important and critical commitment from Arab philanthropy on how to address climate. So it's been a really interesting journey from feeling very isolated to bringing on all of the people that you're going to meet today from our network. And so a little bit about the climate commitment and AFF's climate commitment. This is part of the Philanthropy for Climate initiative that has been spearheaded by WINGS. WINGS is the international network of networks, so the worldwide initiative for grant makers support team. We were supposed to have our beloved Erica Miller with us today, who kind of drives the Philanthropy for Climate initiative at WINGS, but she's not feeling very well, so she wasn't able to join us. And in her place, we have Samira, who's going to kind of also give you a little bit of background on WINGS's climate commitment. But I do think it's really critical to give a huge shout out to Erica, first of all, just to say thank you so much for all of the support that she's provided the AFF team over the last couple of years, and bringing us to today, which allows AFF to present the first ever regional commitment from the Philanthropy for Climate initiative. We're the first official launch. We're joined by the Brazil launch. We're joined very recently by the South Africa launch. So it's a really kind of wonderful testament to the kind of work that we can do together when we collaborate and we partner up. And Erica's been so incredibly critical in that. So I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge her even in her absence. And then I'll let Samira talk a little bit more about, the Wings perspective on all of this. So like I said, we launched this Arab Philanthropy Commitment on Climate Change officially in Baku on the 15th of November. And it's in collaboration, again, with the Global Philanthropy for Climate movement. It's had support from Wings and the Ford Foundation. And this commitment generally just represents a real critical step towards addressing the economic, the social, and the environmental impacts of climate change. And we're excited that we're able to do that from a uniquely Arab perspective. So, this commitment from a regional perspective is designed to mobilize philanthropic resources. It's designed to foster regional cooperation and to drive climate action across the Arab region, which, as many of you know, is disproportionately vulnerable to climate impact. So at COP28 in Dubai, we announced that we would lead on the development of this regional commitment. And we've taken the framework of the International Philanthropy Commitment on Climate Change and adapted it to the Arab context. So we've done this over the course of 2 years. We launched a working group of about a dozen philanthropic organizations, many of whom join us here today, that are operating in the region, and that we wanted to tailor this climate commitment to serve as a guide to help these organizations curb climate injustices and incorporate the initiative around climate change into already pre-existing programs that they were doing, to advance public good, obviously around the philanthropic sector. So the commitment itself showcases the power of that collaboration, like I mentioned before, between all of these organizations as we've come together in this very strong Arab coalition to work towards a sustainable, low-carbon future that is both fair and inclusive. And it also takes into account region-wide characteristics that acknowledge the Arab context. And one of the things that is really critical about this is that we know that the Arab region is far more susceptible to the impacts of climate change than the rest of the world, but also is one of the least contributing regions to this issue. So it's kind of that, it's part of the tension for why it was at first maybe a little bit difficult to bring Arab foundations on board with this, because a lot of our network members felt like we're not even contributing that much to the climate crisis to begin with. But now we know the data has shown us that we are on the receiving end of a lot of the negative consequences of climate change. So whether we're directly contributing to this issue or not, we have to address it, and we have to find a real kind of consolidated way to address this issue. So that's what brings us here today. And I'm going to let the folks that are actually doing the commitment tell you a little bit more about what that means for them. And I'm also going to ask Samira to jump in and give you, from our partners' perspective, the Wings perspective on this. And then I'll come back and moderate a really interesting kind of back and forth between us and our 7 commitment signatories. So Samira, over to you. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, Nala and Waleed. And it's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of Wings, but also missing our colleague Erica, as Nala mentioned, who's been a key part of this process. And I mean, she's extremely sick. Nothing would keep her away from this. So you have to realize the magnitude of how sick she's feeling to not be here. It is a very exciting moment in time to be celebrating more than a year's worth of partnership and collaboration. And as Nala was saying, this has been in the works in thinking since 2017. So it's a long journey to get to here. And it's been great to be partnering and collaborating with AFF, the members of the Arab Commitment Working Group, and the inaugural signatories of the commitment. Now, complex challenges, complex systems, they require all of us to come together to respond, to be part of these collaboratives, movements, and alliances. So at the core of Philanthropy for Climate is the pressing and urgent need for us to collaborate at every level in order to address the scale and the pace of the climate crisis. Today, the movement brings together more than 850 foundations from across the globe, and it is led by local and regional philanthropy support organizations in 9 geographies. So, Brazil, Canada, France, Italy, Poland, Spain, UK, South Africa now, the Arab Regional Commitment, and then we have a global international signatory commitment as well. Now, the network organizations who are behind this, we see them as powerful mobilizers who can engage philanthropic organizations to take climate action. These network organizations know their local context best, they have trusting relationships with member foundations, and they can rally their community around crucial transformations that are needed from the philanthropic sector. From the inception, global collaboration has been a foundational element of philanthropy for climate. The international framework, which Naila mentioned, was actually created by a group of over 40 organizations from 21 countries, representing more than 22,000 funders. So, similar to the national and regional commitments, who work with steering committees and working groups to adapt the international framework to the local context. Today, all of the commitment hosts come together every couple of months to support each other's work by sharing learning, exchanging best practices, collaborating on strategy and shared challenges, and really building capacity to deliver the commitments locally and regionally. And I think this is the core of what strengthens the global movement and action overall. At the regional level, the commitment brings together a community of foundations committed to doing more on climate, regardless of funding priorities, size, or geographical focus, because of the systemic nature of the crisis. In this case, with AFF at the lead, foundations in the Arab region who join the commitment will learn together from each other and collaborate to improve practices and increase impact. And at the same time, these experiences and expertise will feed into global discussions and cross continental exchanges. So, just as the climate crisis transcends borders, so should the philanthropic response. Through these locally and regionally led and globally coordinated commitments, connections are made at the horizontal and vertical levels across the field for more and better climate philanthropy. We know and we've heard climate change is already impacting everything, and in some cases disproportionately, from health to education, racial equity to economic stability, and much, much more. All foundations have a role to play. And through the commitment, its framework, and the community it brings together, especially the potential for philanthropic action that integrates climate considerations can truly be unlocked. So today, it's great to see AFF is leading foundations from across the Arab region into this global movement, bringing the Arab voice, experience, and expertise to strengthen our united, collective global response from philanthropy in the face of this shared challenge. So big congratulations to AFF, the working group members, the inaugural signatories on this very big milestone, and more of those who will join us moving forward. Back to you, Nala.
Thank you so much, Samira. Thank you so much. That's great. I think it really helps that you've given kind of like the overall motivation behind all of this from the Wings perspective, which also really, I mean, just when I'm hearing you talk about all this, it just makes me realize, you know, we know we talk so much in this sector about the importance of collaborating, the importance of cooperating, the importance of partnering with each other. And I really, you know, I want to stress how specifically and acutely and accurately this collaboration represents that. The work that we've done with Wings and this journey that we've done with Wings over the last couple of years really is a testament to kind of the power of that commitment of this of these values, you know, of cooperating and collaborating. Because I know, I mean, I'm gonna, you know, transfer this over now to Walid to give you a presentation of the commitment itself. But Walid will tell you, when he and I first started talking with Erica about what this would look like, we were like deer in headlights, both of us. We're like, we have no idea. How are we gonna wrangle all of these people and bring together and launch something about such a critical issue when neither one of us has any expertise in how, you know, how to drive a climate kind of change driven conversation. And, you know, today here we are, like launching this incredible commitment, and we have so many network members and working group members that are a part of it. And it just really, it warms my heart, you know, and in a moment of time where so much of what's happening, not just in our region, but frankly around the world, is so depressing and so helpless. this really, and I'm not trying to be cheesy, but it really is a moment to celebrate. And so I hope that we can take the next, hour and kind of set aside all of the misery that we're seeing and just really celebrate this incredible collaboration. So on that note, Walid, if you can walk us all through the presentation of the commitment itself, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Naila. Thank you, Samira. Thank you, everyone, for being with us here today. Over the coming few minutes, I'm going to present you the climate commitment that has been developed in collaboration with our working group members, of course. So thank you all for the great work that has been done throughout 2024. And at the end of the session, we're going to be talking about our plans for 2025. I'm going to share with you my screen. So Naila, to start with, specifically for Naila and Samira, I think you have covered a lot on the commitment itself, how it was developed, and putting it in context within the Arab region, which is the first part of the commitment where we show what we call the preamble and how relevant it is to the Arab region as opposed to the other locally led commitments that were developed and the international initiative that was developed by Wings and Philea. So as the working group convened their work throughout 2024, we have started to build on the international commitment on climate change. And we thought how we can make it more relevant to the Arab region. What stands out? The commitment itself calls for all organizations in all Arab countries to act together, to collaborate together, and commit to action to tackle the climate injustice that the region is facing, due to actions that are caused by nations outside of the region and inside the region, of course. And this has led to, as Samira has said, disproportionate impacts on climate. As a matter of fact, the Arab region itself is warming twice as fast as the global average, and this will affect close to 600 million people. We already see the effects of climate injustice in the region, and we see that as in water scarcity, food scarcity, floods, rising sea levels, rising temperatures, of course, that we have seen over the last few years. So the region is also seeing conflicts and insecurity, which really affects the right to live in a healthy environment for now and for many years to come. We're going to be seeing those effects. We are facing very significant challenges as the region is depending on fossil fuels, and some countries will face economic risks trying to diversify their economies when transitioning to renewable energy, of course. That is the first challenge. Other challenges that will follow in the region is that the region is facing already conflicts, which make the region very vulnerable to the impact of environmental degradation. The lack of data is also another issue and is also an obstacle for the region. Because when designing and implementing adaptation and mitigation strategies, we don't have enough data to act upon. And something that's very important for the region, we have very limited financial capabilities, of course. Philanthropy, in that sense, has a major role to play by mobilizing resources, supporting innovation, and filling the data gap. As supporters to advance the public good, philanthropy has to ensure that the transition to low-carbon economies must be just and also inclusive. We all must work together and work very quickly to tackle this issue. Of course, we recognize that countries in the regions are affected differently, and that our actions must be aligned with global frameworks like the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, but they have to be tailored to the specific needs of the region. We also believe that the wide-scale collaboration through this commitment will help us all to catalyze the change that is needed at this stage to build a resilient and equitable future for all of us. The framework recognizes that signatories, all of you, will start at different points depending on their capacities, and that is a process of doing things differently. Today, we invite you all to become signatories to the commitment. So what does the commitment entail itself? What does it say? The commitment is made of 7 pillars. And the first pillar is focused on education and empowerment. We will ensure that we inform and educate all our stakeholders about the effects of climate injustice and how to tackle them. We also commit on giving data to reduce the lack of it in the region, so we can address the climate crisis in an informed and effective way. Moving on to the second pillar, which focuses on the commitment of resources themselves that are needed. We will commit diverse, flexible, and coordinated resources to accelerate the local efforts that address the causes of climate injustice. We understand that the funds may vary and that they should be deployed in a consistent way and guided by local actors to achieve a defined goal that all of us should have. We also need to rethink about the value of faith-based institutional giving practices like awqaf and zakat, and revive such practices in the region. As we are designing our programs, we will look at opportunities to contribute to a fair transition to net zero and supporting adaptation and resilience for the local communities. The approach must address causes of climate injustice in responding to the society's current and emerging needs, and to ensure that the shift to green economies will benefit everyone, especially the marginalized communities. Cross-sector collaboration is definitely needed to have a holistic impact through this kind of collaboration. When it comes to endowment and assets, we must consider climate in the sourcing and management of our assets ourselves. The investment strategies will be aligned with reducing dependence on fossil fuels and a commitment to divest from extractive practices. We will also use our collective power when possible to advocate for policies that support climate-just investments from governments and the private sector. When it comes to internal operations and how an organization operates, we will take action to reduce our environmental footprint by adopting energy-efficient practices, promote renewable energy, and implementing waste reduction strategies, of course. Our work culture must promote environmental responsibility internally. On advocacy and policy change, we will collaborate with different stakeholders to amplify the voices of the less powerful populations. We will prioritize to support evidence-based advocacy, capacity development for the CSOs, and use philanthropic platforms to elevate the voices of the underrepresented. We will build national and regional coalitions, also keeping in mind the specific context of the Arab region itself. And finally, the last pillar on transparency and accountability. We will commit to collect and publish data annually on the measures we have taken in support of all the different pillars, so we can share progress and identify areas where we can improve, and develop a culture of accountability that promotes learning, sharing good practices, and encourages the community to raise the ambition. We need to raise the bar a bit. I want to thank all the working group members for all the effort that they have put developing this commitment within the Arab regional context throughout 2024, and thank them in advance for all the work that we're going to be putting together, working in 2025, which we'll talk about the plans in order to launch something bigger in Brazil during COP30. Again, I would like to give a big shout out to Wings, specifically Erica, who's not with us here today. She has supported this work tremendously. She has supported me personally tremendously throughout my journey in learning about climate change and the role of philanthropy. throughout the year. And of course, special thanks to the Ford Foundation for supporting our work. We invite you. We're going to be sharing this link with everyone in the chat, and we're going to be following with everyone who attended with more information about the climate commitment. But we invite you all to sign up to the commitment using this link. I think I took enough time, and now it's time to give it back to Naila to listen to our working group members. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Walid. That was great. And I, again, just like a shout out to you also, because honestly, the amount of work that you and the rest of the AFF team have done in working with the working group, with the signatories, to get us to the point where we actually have 2 confirmed signatories to date, in addition to the working group members themselves, who I'm hoping will also ultimately finalize their signatory commitments as well, is really just an incredible job. And I'm so proud of this team, really. Like, thank you so much for everything. So we have, again, like, the working group itself is made up, I think, of a dozen or so network members and non-network members who aren't necessarily part, of the AFF membership network, but are part of our larger kind of strategic and partnership network. But we have 2 confirmed signatories to date. So we're going to hear from those 3 signatories to date. We're going to hear from 2 of them today, from the Sawiris Foundation for Social Development, which is an Egypt-based organization, and then from Greenpeace International, but the Greenpeace MENA group. So those 2 will kind of give us first. I'm going to ask Mais, the Deputy Executive Director of Sawiris Foundation, to join us first. And Mais, I think, just again to kind of help couch the conversation in the importance and the necessity of this commitment for the Arab region, I'd love to ask if you could tell us a little bit about the reasons for why Sawiris Foundation thought it was important not only to join the working group, but to be a committed signatory to this call to action and this climate commitment.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you, Naila, and of course, thank you, Walid, and everyone, and Samira from Wings. It's a pleasure to be amongst you. Now, I think part of it to understand why we were one of the first entities to run and say, yes, this is exactly what we want to be engaged with and sign off on, is going a little bit back into history of the DNA of the Sawiris Foundation, because historically, and not so many people know about this, we were 2 separate foundations, the Sawiris Foundation for Environmental Affairs, and then the Sawiris Foundation for Social Empowerment. And then a merge happened around 2018, 2019. So, I mean, within the DNA of the foundation, I mean, the issues around climate change, but as exactly you described, Naila, there were scattered interests. I mean, there was the interest of supporting projects related to renewable energies, related to increasing awareness around the topic. We have been sponsoring scholarships around in a partnership with the Technical University of Berlin, which had their very first international-based campus in Ghana, Egypt, sponsored by us and by the foundation. So we were sponsoring scholarships around energy engineering, water engineering, urban development, in an attempt to also increase awareness around the importance of the topic and creating agents of change to help us all take this issue a little bit further. But then part of our new strategy is focus on reducing multidimensional poverty and focused on the most marginalized communities. As we became an evidence-based organization and foundation, and we're utilizing a lot of our resources and investing a lot of the resources on impact evaluations and how those marginalized communities are mostly affected by the different economic, environmental, and social shocks, it became evident that we have to take it more seriously. I mean, we have to put some sort of a framework and accountability measure on us as a foundation to ensure that we're not just preaching around the importance of the issue, but that we also have a commitment within our funding that is directed towards this. As you reached out, as Walid and Naila, you had reached out to us a couple of months ago, and even prior to the COP 29, it was exactly the time when we had decided, okay, climate change has to become a cross-cutting strategy for us. We have to include it in our results framework. We have to learn, as you said, like we have to learn how to better report on it, better hold ourselves accountable to the board, to our constituents, and to our partners as well. So it just aligned perfectly well with us. We are still in the process. We actually also had reached out to F20. We're also members of the F20 group who also they encouraged us. They said, you know what, we also can also through the AFF, through other partners who've already went through this experience, we're happy to support you. And again, as we're a learning organization, it's very important for us to learn from others, to build on where others ended, and to see how we could also share the results of this learning journey with others as well.
Amazing. Yeah, see, this again, like, is just so interesting to me how for all of us, it's been like, it's such an obvious thing, but we were all in the same kind of position of, oh, I'm not sure that we know how to incorporate this. And I think that's what really kind of, makes it obvious how critical this kind of a collaboration, a collaborative commitment is. So, Walid walked us through the pillars, the 7 pillars of the commitment. And, I know obviously a lot of the different members in the working group come from different parts of the sector. So have maybe different expertise to lend to each one of these pillars. And as much as it's great to know where our expertise is most useful, I'm always more interested to know, where do we see the biggest challenges, and how do we think of different ways that we might be able to mitigate those challenges, right? Because that's where we get innovative. When it's easy, we know it's easy. We know how to handle it. But it's where the things are, where the challenges lie is where I'm interested in understanding how we innovate. And this is one of the things that's so uniquely interesting about philanthropy as a sector, is that the agility of this sector allows us to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more innovative. So I'm interested to know from you guys' perspective, from Sawidas' perspective, which are the 1 or 2 of the more challenging pillars that you see, and where is the challenge, and how do you think of tackling it?
Yeah, no, thank you for this. I think, definitely, because all the pillars are, I would say, a little bit challenging, especially in the context of the Arab world. But then, of course, when it comes to the Arab world, also data and generating data and evidence is also one of the most one of the biggest challenges that currently exist. But what we're hoping to achieve through it is, as I said, like, we invest a lot on impact evaluations. We're partners with JPAL on co-funding and establishing the Egypt Impact Lab, for example, under the Ministry of Planning in Egypt, where it's also launching this month an Air and Water Lab, another lab also that tackles issues around climate change. So this is how we're hoping that we can generate learning evidence, as well as sharing data and sharing lessons learned around this, and also influencing policy change and advocacy, which is also another one of the most existing challenges at the moment. Again, because of the complexity, as Walid has earlier described, it's a very complex cause that is interrelated between many different aspects and ministries and causalities. And that needs to be addressed and tackled differently from the different regions, at least in Egypt as well. So part of it, the way we try to influence change and address those challenges is like we adopt like a bottom-up approach where we fund some of the initiatives on the ground, but we also generate the learning, and we hope by conducting impact evaluations and sharing and like rigorous impact evaluations at national scale, this is how we hope to influence also policymaking and advocate for the different change at different levels. So this is the approach that we're currently adopting across the different implementation, and definitely that we hope to adopt also for the climate change and for integrating it into our own work as well. Now, also what is also, it's interestingly enough, it's actually integration. We're still in the process of integration, but I'm guessing that this is not going to be easy, because we have running ongoing projects. It's business as usual. So having to integrate this on ongoing and running projects isn't going to be easy. It requires time. It requires time also to build the capacity, not just of the partner organizations that we're working with, but also within us as a team and staff of the Sawidas Foundation. So we're able to walk the talk in a way. We need to also be ourselves advocates first, before we ask others to adapt also to the different implementation strategies. So this is also going to be a challenging area. You're muted, Naila.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I had a little technical glitch. No, I was just saying that's amazing. I just, it's interesting because for me, what's so critical about having this conversation and hearing this perspective. And again, why I'm so insistent that we talk about the challenges is because even in what you've just described, you've also described why, like how transformational this is, right? Because so you're one organization working mostly in a national context. Come on, I mean, one of the, it's a very critical national context. I mean, Egypt is one of the largest populations in the region and all of that. But even within this one kind of, potentially we could say like a niche sector, still drives a kind of transformation in, within your own organization. And again, that's, it again kind of doubles down for me how incredibly important it is to have these partners that have been able to walk us through. So if our partners at Wings and F20 had not been able to walk AFF through the journey, we would not have been able to come to the working group and the signatories and walk you through the journey. And it's kind of like this really amazing, so this small little initiative that is, addressing a regional context of climate change is also contributing to the potential transformation of some of the organizations that are part of it. So I just, I love that. I love the synergy of all of this. So, as we try and encourage and bring on more signatories from within the working group and kind of expanding this beyond the current working group of a dozen or so, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you guys at Sawida's Foundation feel about the benefit of having been part of this working group and being signatories, and how do you see this framework that we've all worked on for so long together, how do you see it enabling you to achieve more, but then also to encourage others to come on? How do you think this, this commitment can help other organizations address the climate commitment and be a part of it?
No, I mean, actually being part of the working group, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to join the working group, was for us to learn. Because I mean, you guys, or like the working group, and was doing a great job bringing experts on board. So by joining the working group, not only were we trying to add value to what's being drafted, but also we were learning from others and learning how to possibly draft the commitment, what it entails, what it would mean for us at the foundation. But it was also extremely important for us, as we wanted to ensure that as we are developing our cross-cutting strategy around climate change, we want to make sure that it adapts and is able to respond to this commitment as well. So once we develop also a further framework for the commitment, we want to ensure that both kind of indicators and strategies are aligned, because we also want to ensure that it imposes a further accountability measure on us as a foundation to take this seriously. I mean, we definitely take it seriously, but we want to ensure that we're also putting our foot down, that we're also implementing the different commitments. It also helped us also strategically think beyond, because sometimes we get stuck of what others should be doing and how should we be channeling our funds on the ground, but we in many cases we forget about ourselves, our practices, our operations. So this was also an eye-opener for us at the foundation to look into, like, what does it mean for us as well? Are we able? And I still remember a side conversation I had was the team members. They were like, "Are you sure you want to sign on this commitment? This seems like it's imposing a lot of kind of accountability levels on us. Are we sure we can commit?" And actually, no, I wasn't sure that we can commit, but I said, okay, but we have to start somewhere, and it's fine. We're going to learn along the way. I'm sure this network, this group will help us grow together, will help us learn how to better implement, how to better strategize, and how to better report also on the different challenges, but also on the learning that we're getting out of this, because that's the collective kind of thinking part that is important for us. Now, how we're going to, I mean, there are different approaches of how we are going to encourage others also to join the commitment. I mean, part of it is not only do we work with some partner organizations where we, as a grant-making organization, channel our funds, but we also work in partnership, and this is part of our mandate, that we want to ensure that we maximize our impact and that we work with a lot of partners. So on the agenda of the partnership, because when we adopt climate change as a cross-cutting strategy, it will not only be imposed on the project that we're funding, it has to be adapted throughout our operation at large, and partnership being one vital aspect of how we implement and how we work inside of Egypt. So we want to ensure that also not just us, but also our partners are adhering to the different standards. It becomes part of kind of the selection criteria of which partners we want to be working with, how we approach them, how we encourage them also to become signatories of this commitment through the different programs that we're funding, through the different, I mean, we have our own vocational schools as well, so we have access to direct beneficiaries as well. So this is also another aspect to ensure that we're also able to maximize impact and spread the word a little bit more further beyond our constituencies to ensure that that we get the word out there. We're also members on many other groups. We sit on different committees inside of Egypt. So this is also another way we were hoping to ensure that everyone knows about it, that we gather as many collaborative partners as possible to join the commitment.
So I love everything you said, but honestly, the thing that kind of really perks me up the most is when you talked about accountability. And the reason for that is, you know, we talk so much in this sector about the values of accountability and transparency and what they mean in various different contexts, right? So one of the kind of maybe more intellectual conversations around accountability and transparency as it relates to the philanthropy sector has been much more focused on fiscal accountability and transparency, financial accountability, you know, right? And the data that can show, but you've brought in a different perspective on accountability, which is internal accountability and accountability from the sector, you between yourselves and the sector, and you as an organizations to yourselves. And I'm grateful that you're honest about not being 100% sure that you can commit to something, but still taking that risk and trusting, honestly, trusting AFF enough to be partners with you in that risk. Because I think that helps also, and it will help encourage other organizations to come on board as well. So I'm so grateful for that, Mais. Thank you so much. Like you've really given us such just very rich insight into what all this means. So I'm going to move on to our next signatory organization and our next signatory representative from Greenpeace MENA, the fundraising director, Perihan Abul-Ala from Greenpeace MENA. And Perihan, I'm going to ask you the same first question as I asked Mais about what was it that kind of drew you to decide to join this commitment and to join it, especially with AFF, because I mean, you guys come from Greenpeace comes from a different perspective, whereas this is your life's work. So you don't need to be taken on the journey of why climate change is important and why addressing climate change is important. It's what you do every single day. And so I'm curious to know why the AFF working group and the AFF commitment is the one that you guys chose to kind of highlight.
Yeah, thank you, Naila and Walid, Samira as well for inviting us today. And actually, yes, the story started a little bit late in Greenpeace MENA. I believe it started during the last annual event that you had in Cairo, where there were the climate discussion, the discussions about the climate action and group, and discussing those concepts at the time. And yes, as Greenpeace MENA, a global network and organization for more than 50 years. MENA office is one of the latest, being back in 2000, established in 2018 in Lebanon. I believe this brings us responsibility. So we have the global experience. We've been there. This is our bread and butter for long. We've been included in all of the main global challenges in different realms, and together with the local expertise, because for Greenpeace MENA, we're locals coming from different countries, being from West Asia, Levant, North Africa. So it is how to localize this experience and providing innovative solutions, collaborative modules, how to tackle the climate crisis. Because as you even mentioned earlier, there are historical responsibilities for the climate crisis. The industrial countries are on top of it. They contributed the most, and they are the least who are paying for it. So, and yes, our region is the most impacted, even though if it's sometimes sometimes it's not clear to some organization or to some communities, especially in comparison with all the economic crisis and the turmoil in our regions, wars and everything. So I believe that our role here is, it wasn't it wasn't an option, it was an honor, and it was obligatory for us to contribute to this discussion, to the solutions, to the synergy of network and partnerships, and to leverage the best out of it. So this is, I have a lot of comments for many other questions which you've shared, so I'll try to slow down a bit.
No problem. I actually, I want to just give you the space anyway, as one of the 3 signatories, to give us a bit more insight of how this, first of all, how do you feel that this commitment will help Greenpeace MENA achieve its objectives? How do you, what are the pillars in your view that are the most challenging for Greenpeace MENA? Is it all of them? Is it one of them? Is it 2 of them? And how do you plan on mitigating some of these challenges? So it's very similar questions to what I was asking Nice, but I imagine that in some cases, the mitigations and the challenges might be a bit different. So please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Yani, I believe you've tackled most of it. So actually, yes, the climate attention is very rare global-wise, and definitely it's even rarer on regional or local levels. Because yes, yani, I believe, and I keep repeating those numbers, that the percentage of funders to the climate crisis globally is less than 2%. So imagine how it goes when it comes to regional or local levels. And right now, with all of the very powerful dynamics and variable change which are taking over the world, like for example, while we're talking about the historical responsibility, and US comes on top of it since the 1820, if I'm not mistaken, something around this figure in the 18th century. And now with Donald Trump aid cuts and pulling out of the Paris Agreement, all of these variable things are affecting us, even though, for example, Greenpeace MENA, as you know, is an independent organization. We do not receive any grants from political or multilateral organizations yet, but this have a lot of crucial effects on the ecosystem, be it on the government, be it to the grant making association organizations, the grant receiving ones. It's a lot of dynamics which actually should push us at some extent and to some point to unite as local or regional players to utilize this solidarity, this kind of collaborative, creating synergies which empower our situation, that we don't always enjoy being seated as an audience watching what's going around in the world, while we're the most impacted by all of the political challenges which are there, be it climate or non-climate even. So I believe that this is something, it's not luxurious anymore. We have to do it. And for the pillars, actually, most of the pillars, not most, all of the pillars which were mentioned and good job for Erica or Walid or even yourself, whoever developed this very first draft, that most of the pillars are really reflecting our values, our work, our theory of change in a way or another. And if I need to focus on or prioritize the pillars which really matching with our work, I believe it's both pillar 1 and 6. Pillar 1 because it's the education and empowerment, and how to empower the ecosystem and different players on how to tackle the climate crisis, each from his own angle or from his own theory of change in a way or another. And for the pillar 6, I believe Pillar 6 is really our own competitive edge in a way or another, because when it comes to advocacy, you'll find that the campaigning organizations are very few in our region. The advocacy is very rare in our region. And here we even bringing the DNA of Greenpeace together with the MENA fingerprint. So what we're trying to promote is how to promote innovative solutions, how to promote different ways of tackling the current crisis with our own capacities in a way or another. So when Walid was going through the pillars, for example, most of it, we had a lot of work which is covering it, being promoting for well-being economies, the Islamic finance, and how to utilize such a huge industry with more than 4 trillions of US dollars, for something like this. And all of these potentials and how to utilize to better enhance our ecosystem, to better enhance the potentials in our regions, how to utilize all of these things, which is يعني purely MENA. So I believe this is part of the glory of this working group, is the power of unity, creating synergies of collaboration, having even solid outputs that reflects the challenges in our ecosystem and our organizations. So I can talk until tomorrow. I can the sky's the limit here. So please feel free to manage this.
Thank you. Thank you, Perihan. Yeah, I mean, look, I think, again, you mentioned another sort of obsession for us now, which is around Islamic finance, Islamic giving principles. There's a lot of conversation in the sector about how do we tap into, and still while respecting kind of the ethos and the values around zakat funding, for example. How do we unlock the potential of that? We know AFF and Greenpeace MENA are working together on trying to also look at different fundraising modalities that may help, and help Greenpeace and others like your organization tap into the fundraising models that could help support this. And I think it's so, there's a note that I received, and this is what I love about these webinars, and this is what I love about bringing together all of these incredible people, is that everyone that joins is coming and joining and listening to this conversation for a very key reason, because they really care about the issue that we're talking about. So as you're talking, we've got some people on the chat kind of coming in and giving some extra information to help support what you're talking about. I just received a LinkedIn message from someone who's also part of the participants, Sharif Al-Maghrabi, who was saying, I'm in the webinar now, but could you please make sure that you also highlight the importance of the SDGs in all of this, right? And so SDG 13, for example, around climate action, and the importance of how that relationship intersects with other goals, such as clean energy, which is SDG number 7, or number 11, sustainable cities, or number 14, life below water, number 15, life on land. So again, like looking at the challenge that we face when we're siloed in our little, in our little subsectors and subgroups, where we're trying to figure out how do we address this, but then knowing that there is a much larger cause for why this is so critical, and intersections around the sector that can help us support what we're doing. And so I think that's why the launch of this commitment and the launch of this working group was so critical, so that we could find a way where we could harness the collective power of all of these different initiatives and maybe help optimize how we can feed into it. So for you as Greenpeace MENA, and then after, I'm going to ask you just 2 more minutes to kind of give your final thoughts on this, because I also want to give space to the working group members, and we have quite a few of them who joined us today. And then I want to open it up to Q&A from the participants who are joining as observers. And just a point of kind of housekeeping to everyone who's with us on this. We have a Q&A tab and a chat tab. It would be great if you use the Q&A tab specifically to ask your questions, because I'll be monitoring those. And then at the end of the last 20 minutes of this, I'll open it up so that you guys can have your questions answered by the panelists. So just for everyone watching, please use the Q&A tab. I'll monitor the chat tab as well, just in case, but it would be great if it could all be in one place. So just to Sharif's point, Perihan, could you address a little bit about how do you as Greenpeace MENA kind of, you're working a cross section of the sector with AFF's working group, with potentially other working groups, obviously, that you must be a part of, globally, with how do you, harness the collective power of all of this to address the SDGs? How do you guys manage that? You're not a huge team, but how do you manage that from your perspective as well? And how do you think this working group can help you as you do that?
I'm very glad for all of the knowledge you know about us, including our capacity, because yes, this is a main challenge. Actually, we have priority countries which we're trying to focus. We have priority campaigns where we're trying to bring impact into the countries which we're providing our innovative solutions in a way or another. So we're trying to prioritize and focus. And thanks to our campaign team who are just great guys being able, our team is already diverse in different countries. We're trying also to bring the locality to this theory of change in a way or another. So and back to one of your points about the Islamic giving, yes, this is also a great focus for the Islamic blended finance, because the Islam, which is the most the biggest ratio of Muslims are there in MENA region. So I believe that, yes, a lot of the ethical and a lot of Quran values and a lot of hadith is all going around the climate, even though if this is not, and how to protect our environments and how to maintain a healthy sphere for us as human beings. So, and there's a lot of zakat and sadaqah dedicated for this. And I believe that, yes, this is one of the main concerns also, that we need how to frame this, how to work on it, how to motivate people and to support the environment in a way or another, even being a top choice for individuals. Because with all of the philanthropic crisis around, it seems as if the cause is quite luxurious, while it's not the case. And back to your last question, so through all of these campaigns and being an active members in different political and philanthropic spheres, we make sure that we're up to the pace, that we're following the sustainable development goals, that we're already we're trying to promote this through the most direct and indirect channels that supports the implementation and the giving a fostering culture to those campaigns and theory of change.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Perihan. I really appreciate, again, this perspective and the commitment. Like, again, this is one of the things that's really critical about this. This is a journey that we've all gone on for quite some time. And to have 3 signatories show and represent their commitment to not only committing to the climate crisis and committing to being signatories to this initiative, but then also to help us as we bring on additional organizations on this journey. It's a real representation of that kind of camaraderie, I guess, because I think at the end of the day we recognize, especially with some of the more urgent and immediately urgent issues that we're facing in our sector, in our region especially, none of us can do any of this alone. None of us are going to be able to alleviate these issues on our own. And so that's why I'm really appreciating kind of the collective power that's being represented in this webinar today. So I'm going to go to the working group members and ask each one of our working group members who are present today to kind of give just a 2-minute intervention on, tell us a bit about why it was important for your organization to join and be a part of this working group. And then what are you thinking in terms of coming on as more committed signatories to this working group, and what kind of, what other ways can this working group help support you? So I'm going to ask Mohammed Kamel from Greenish Foundation to go first, the executive director of Greenish Foundation. And just, Mohammed, if you can let us know a bit about how you see this regional commitment as a tool to be able to rally other Arab foundations around this urgently needed climate change. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you very much, Naila, and thank you to all the speakers before me and all the efforts for this great commitment. I think we're at a very critical juncture of climate work in general. The current landscape we're looking at globally and regionally is getting more confrontational in a way where we're at a point where we need to decide how we're going to deal with climate change at the national level in a way where we're not too dependent on foreign support. For instance, let me just further clarify this. We're now in a point where in COP29, there was clear indications where most probably the climate finance that a lot of years have been spent on are not going to be achieved. Here we're talking about public finance. We're not going to get the targets we're asking for, nowhere near the amount of money needed for actual climate weather reparations or adaptation, etc. So in this very important juncture, and I'm speaking to you from Brazil, we just met with the COP30 president yesterday, and he was mentioning, and I want to quote, that we're 10 years from the Paris Agreement. We're in a point where global North countries are not matching what they have sort of promised, but that is not an ask or for us to give up on hope, right? We shouldn't just surrender hope. We shouldn't just surrender in general. This is the start of probably something greater. In that sense, one very easy example to reference, USAID has sort of went on a halt recently, and that's quite interesting for us who work in development and in climate. And also the US government has stopped a lot of financing, foreign financing to governments, to nonprofits, etc., beyond USAID. But Bloomberg Philanthropies came in and said, we're going to cover what the US government was covering for the UN. And all the UN commitments that were committed by the US government are going to be through Bloomberg Philanthropies and Co., a number of other climate philanthropies. Now, that is a good reference for what the power of philanthropy could look like. I don't think that what should the role of philanthropy in the Arab region. I think in the Arab region, we are having multiple challenges, conflict-related, politically, etc. And I don't have a lot of time, but the one point I want to specify, pillar one, on empowerment, what philanthropy organizations and foundations can really focus on is how can they empower organizations and individuals to do the roles that governments cannot, right? Philanthropy and financing through philanthropy is not a substitute for public finance, and it never will be. So in that regard, it can really work on empowering individuals who can then be part of a much greater public finance infrastructure, etc. I'll stop here, but that's how we're seeing this could possibly evolve.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. You brought up two things that just like, one of them is the subject of a whole other webinar that we need to have. It's around the USAID funding cuts and that, you know, the kind of catastrophe / opportunity that represents. And, you know, if we start talking about that, I'll never stop. And then, we'll hijack the rest of this. But I think it's also the second thing that you said that's really, really critical is about the role of philanthropy vis-a-vis the role of public funds and government funding. And again, it takes us back to the agility of the philanthropy sector. And in some ways, that's wonderful. I mean, in many ways, that's wonderful. But it also then ends up putting an onus of responsibility on philanthropy that it cannot fulfill. And it's where we get that tension, that moment of tension of having to hold public sector accountable to where it's failing, right? So yeah, I mean, 100% with you on everything that you've said. And I also think I know I didn't give you too much time to kind of speak about this, but I think I heard a little bit of optimism in your voice about the potential opportunity that this is representing, which I'm very grateful for because I have not been feeling very what's the word? Anyway, optimistic. Thank you. I haven't been feeling very optimistic. So I like that you infused a bit of optimism in this. Thank you, Mohammed, so much. And good luck in Brazil. That's amazing. So I'm going to ask next if Hannah from Edge Funders Alliance can also give us a little bit about your perspective on this and the importance of this working group for you, and what does it take and what is it looking like for you to kind of take this commitment forward. Hannah, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I feel like there's a lot that's already been said, so I'll try to complement, I think, Mohammed's point as well, because a lot resonated from what you shared. But we joined this really from the perspective of interrogating what philanthropy could do regionally as a way to reclaim power also, and to be more in the lead to disrupt the power dynamics that exist within the sector right now, with money flowing from the global minority to the global majority in a way that's very attached to agendas that maybe do not service the region. So we really came into this with this power analysis and power like questions around power. And I think this is why the question on climate change versus climate injustice was such a point also of conversation within the discussion of the group of like what language to include. And it was really important to mention, and you'll see that in all the different pillars, that it's climate injustice, because the language on climate change has been historically so apoliticized, as though climate change affects us all. And I think, you know, this has already been said on the call. There's a history of extraction. There's a need for reparations. Loss and damage fund can't be equal for all. Not everyone is expected to give to that equally. There is a language on reparations that needs to be uplifted. But also I want to balance this to say, and this is something that you started, Mohammed, there is also responsibility within the region to kind of reinterrogate these dynamics that have been historically also founded to stifle the local creativity and to stifle the local alternatives, systemic alternatives within the region. There's decades and decades of starvation within our region for folks to take the lead in figuring out what alternatives work within our context. So I think this is also to say, you know, what is the role of philanthropy? I think philanthropy, beyond supporting projects, right, beyond supporting things that are around mitigation, like, you know, I heard, you know, tech solutions or solar energy or, you know, mitigation, land, water, all of these are super important, but we also need to fund the political infrastructure of like, what does sovereignty look like within the region? What does decision-making, collective decision-making that, you know, repairs the ruptures that have historically been intentionally made because of the scarcity mindset and the, you know, the tap that keeps opening and closing because of the whims of the global majority, and we see a global minority, and we see that right now with Trump and the Paris Agreement. We can't remain under these under that control, right? So what does sovereignty processes look like? And I think this is another area that philanthropy within the region can really step up. And the last thing that I will say, because I know it was touched upon, but it's really, really important, I think, to say again, that climate funders are not just funders that, you know, again, do this like green energy and all, these are so important, but also being a climate funder means funding healthcare, funding, you know, quality of living, funding migration, relocation, funding, you know, someone mentioned Gaza, for example, so funding, you know, humanitarian aid, all of these things, this is all interlinked because of the systemic injustice that we're facing. So it's really important for climate funders to examine politically, like what does it mean to be in a climate crisis, and to move money with more flexibility towards everything, right? Because climate is like where we live. So I'll pause here. Sorry for taking.
Oh my God, Hannah, could you see me? Like I was gonna jump through the. I'm like, yes, oh my God, yes to every single thing you're saying. Thank you so much for articulating it so perfectly and so critically at this extremely important time. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to say in the very beginning when I was opening, to say, like, in this moment of so many things that are so difficult and so challenging and so critical and important for us to talk about. So, you know, someone in the Q&A was talking about, are we going to say anything about the ecocide of Gaza, which absolutely, I mean, if you've been following AFF, you know, we've talked about almost nothing else but Gaza for the last 15 months, and will continue for the rest of time. Because of exactly this injustice that you're talking about, and exactly this loss of agency, and the complete exploitation. I mean, let me not get myself deported from wherever country I'm in. But anyway, you know what I mean, that's why I was like this the whole time you're talking, like, hallelujah. So yes, thank you so much for articulating that so perfectly. And this is, again, why it proves to me over and over again, not that I needed any more proof, but how critical it is to have all of these incredible voices as part of these working groups, and how important the working group and the commitment of each of you is to attend. I think it was one meeting a month for 12 months, where, like, you know, you guys all showed up, and if you didn't show up in person, you showed up by giving input on the drafts of the pillars, on the drafts of the commitment, and just to show, like, this is how movements move. I know that sounds like so obvious, but this is how movements move. They start as a small collective of people who then just continuously keep at it, right? So, Hannah, thank you so much. Aditi, Deputy CEO of Impatience Earth, another amazingly important AFF partner in this journey that we've been on. Aditi, I'm going to ask you also to please come in. You guys in Patients Earth are not specifically regional to MENA, so it's another very, very important contribution and insight, because you come from a global perspective on this. Can you also, over to you, same question, just give me your 2 minutes of why this is important, what you hope to get out of it, and what we can do more of.
Thank you. I think Hannah is a very, very hard act to follow, but just want to echo, I feel that the work that we do with clients like wealth holders all over the world, I think the reason why they struggle to start funding in climate, because it just feels really overwhelming. Like, where do you start? What does good look like? What is impact? And I think what's really special about being not just a country commitment like we have in the UK or in Spain or South Africa, but this is a regional commitment. And I think it is a really great opportunity to really learn from each other and take kind of collective action across the region, because the impacts that you're feeling are quite similar, but the causes and the historical and the cultural context around it are really different. And I think it's a really great opportunity to be like, oh, okay, this is how a healthcare funder can fund climate work, or this is how an education funder can fund climate work, or this is how someone who's working on emergency response can also take a climate lens to their work. And I think I'm so sick of the world working and thinking in silos, that this is an opportunity to see that just being kind of broken into pieces, and you guys really working together of taking that intersectional regional approach to this kind of the for the lack of a better word, the poly crisis that we're facing. And I think the other side for us that's really kind of inspiring and I think really important is that philanthropy is such a extractive and colonial concept that it's really important for when it comes to something like climate, the solutions and the support offer and the interventions are very, very place-based, right? I think my first interaction with this work was at the general meeting kind of 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And, I'm born in India, but grew up in the UK, don't have kind of a deep knowledge about kind of Islamic giving. And I remember sitting in a session and people were talking about, well, Islamic finance is all about trust-based giving and kind of not focused on impact and outputs. And I was thinking of Jesus Christ, we keep talking about philanthropy needing to be trust-based and relationship-based and core funding and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, these guys get it. These guys do it every day and everyone does it, right? And so who is global North Philanthropy should not be coming in and teaching you how to do it. You know best. And this is an amazing opportunity for all of you to come together and show us in the Global North how it should be done.
So again, somebody else, I want to jump through the screen and be like, yes, yes, exactly. And I remember the first time we met you was at the AFF annual meeting in Cairo in September 2023. And I mean, literally, I think, what's so critical about this timing is we all met and discussed all of this September 2023, 1 month before, in my view, the entire world changed, right? Because I mean, I've been saying this for the last 15 months and I will continue to say this. I believe that what Gaza has instigated is a complete global, it's the expediting of a global shift that was going to happen anyway. But it's so interesting to see the conversations that we were having about this climate working group pre that moment, right? Pre October 7th, and then everything that's happened since. And in another way, it's also part of why I'm so proud of this working group and everyone who's committed to it, because in the midst of some of the most incredibly trying and difficult times over the last 15 months, these are people, all of you are people who committed and stayed on track and continued to give your time and your effort to talk about this issue, despite the fact that we were going through something so horrific and continue to go through it. But yeah, thank you so much for that. And thanks for really just acknowledging also how critical the perspective of the global majority is in educating the global North. right? Or the global minority rather than the other way around. Really appreciate it. So next, I'm going to ask Mona Abbas, Executive Director of the Asfari Foundation, who have been such just such strong partners to AFF on so many different levels. A, as a member, B, as one of the first instigators of the Gaza Pooled Fund, of bringing together our funding for Gaza, to Gaza, from the Arab region, from the Arab foundations, and then as one of these committed working group members to the climate commitment. So Mona, I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit of your perspective as well, and a bit of your insights on this, because I know that in the very beginning of our journey of the working group, Asfari Foundation wasn't 100% sure how we could incorporate climate into your funding strategy. So I'd like to hear about your journey in this.
Yeah, thank you, Naila, and the AF team, and the working group members for pulling this all together. And we're here now and launching this commitment. Actually, you're right. When we started, we were like, the foundation is more focused on supporting civil society infrastructure, and knowledge production and all that. But I think the magic word was justice. When this working group was emphasizing on using the word climate justice, that was an obvious link of what we are trying to do with civil society. And if you look at our vision as a foundation, the first statement we talk about is we envision a world which justice is the norm. And of course, we're focused on the Middle East. We're focused even more specifically on the Levant countries, the 4 countries that are really suffering from water stress that is leading to affecting farmers, affecting fishers, affecting rural workers, and who are facing increasing challenges like name it, like Walid presented the National about that, like heat waves, declining in crop yields, and all that, which is leading to food insecurity and leading to unemployment, which is affecting economic stability and social stability and political stability. We are in a region that is seeing a lot of wars and conflicts within the one country, and cross-border conflicts. And basically these are like wars over resources, the bottom line, and to have more control over resources, water, gas, oil, and all that, and all is shaped around that. And I believe that, and we believe that civil society is in the core of this, by mobilizing resources, bringing all efforts together, and coordinating, educating, and these are the 2 pillars I think the foundation is more focused on: empowerment and education, advocacy and coordination. And we are in a position to support these pillars by educating communities, people, youth, young generation, on the importance of climate justice and how this is linked to achieving justice at all levels. If you go to any of our capital cities, Naila, in the region, and you go to these privileged neighborhoods, you see 5-star hotels and private swimming pools and private swimming pools in these fancy villas. And you just drive the car 10 minutes drive. You go to a neighborhood where water portion is reduced to the minimum in the same city, in the same country. And here where we can have a civil society that can hold their governments accountable for their national policies and how they can address these issues within the country, and also to hold their countries' commitments to the global frameworks like Paris Agreement and all that. And at the same time, join forces with activists involved in climate justice at a global level, in the global north, to hold countries and governments in the global north accountable, because we cannot keep asking people in the global south, in our region, to pay the price and to be resilient. And you remember, I was very skeptical in using the word resilience when talking about climate change. Of course, we need to be resilient because we need to survive. That's but we don't want to be the ones who are paying the price for climate change and to be the only one adapting to changes that we didn't have a choice for. They are imposed on us. So I think there is a huge role for the civil society to come together to create a critical mass at a national level, at a regional level, and to join the global movements in creating that narrative. And you can see now globally, there is a climate change denial. You can see a president of one of the strongest and thriving countries in the world, just questioning the whole thing and denying that there is a climate change that is affecting the whole world and affecting the global south. So part of it we need to put on the table is the neo-colonial policies across the world that is denying the effect that their policies are having on the global south and on marginalized communities. So I think there is a lot to unpack here, and I believe that communities should take a stronger role in bringing their voices in shaping the climate policies and holding everyone accountable and taking the lead. So I think, yeah, we're very much connected to this, and and it is integrated in everything we do. It's not a separate standalone topic. It is related to health. You can see it is affecting health as well. Like you can see heat-related illnesses spreading across the region. This needs to be addressed from climate justice perspective as well as health. And the examples are a lot there, and yeah, we're together in this.
Yep, we're all in this together. Absolutely. Yeah. And Mona, I mean, you know, again, obviously spot on every single thing that you're saying, and I really, you know, kind of double confirm about the issue of the use of the word resilience in this context. Because again, the use of that word, not just in the climate crisis context, but even in the genocide context of, you know, it's in some cases, it allows people to be lazy because you think, well, these people are going to be resilient. They're resilient. They'll fight back. They'll be able to survive. And it takes away the accountability for what you have done to contribute to why they have to be resilient in the first place. So I really appreciate that point. That's a really, I mean, it's a nuanced point, but it's a very important one. Okay, so our last kind of intervention, I'm going to ask Deepti from the Strategic Partnerships from International Medical Corps, which is another AFF member and another working group member, to give us your perspective as well from, again, a bilateral organization, in a global setting where collaboration really is the only way that you can get any of your work done. And I'd love if you could speak a little bit about how this commitment, which is part of a larger international movement, has opened an opportunity for Arab funders to connect, but also how it can help influence climate philanthropy. And I'd love, Deepti, if you could, because we're going a little bit over the time, but I'm going to give us an extra 5 minutes because we started 5 minutes late. But I would love to address some of the questions that are in the Q&A, which are so many and they're so wonderful and so spot on. But if you could talk a bit, Deepti, about this from the perspective also of the UN agencies and how they've been called into question in terms of their efficacy and their efficiency, some of the trust that's been lost in the sector, not just of UN agencies, but of multinational, international agencies in general, and how that will affect the work that you guys do in International Medical Corps, which is such important work. And then also, if you could couch it a little bit in the context of the geopolitical situation that we're in, not just from a climate perspective, but geopolitically, that context setting. Thank you.
Such a nice, light, easy question to
No pressure, Deepti.
No,
Sorry.
but I love the question because it's so pertinent and probably something we've all been asking ourselves in our own lives for the last 2 weeks and 15 months and even before that, right? We've had to have all of us have had to face, and I'm speaking just kind of plainly to our network here, we've all had to face some terrible truths, inconvenient truths, and scary predictions about the course in which we're headed on. And I recognize that, and I just want to say, I reflect in all of you that this is a moment. It's an opportunity. It's a scary opportunity, though, but it's an opportunity. So let me bring back some of those strains of hope that I had heard earlier. I think what we're finding right now, or at least what I'm seeing over and over again, is that call for community and return to community and networks to help us find our way together. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about what you've created here, Naila, Walid, Erica, all of you. This is the heart of our community, trying to make sure that climate philanthropy coalesces over this very important topic. We can do this. We can do this. And that's the thing that we should all kind of think about. But one of the things that I think somebody mentioned, which is really important, is how becomes overwhelming. What are the examples, though, that we can elevate together? This is the role of climate philanthropy. This is the role of climate philanthropy in the Arab region specifically as well. There are ways that we have already partnered, not just in the last few years, but centuries of collaboration, methods of collaboration, examples of collaboration, where we have done hard things together. We have achieved the impossible together. And so how do we bring those principles together? How do we bring those examples? How do we elevate this network as a force multiplier in our fight to make sure that we have a common future? I'm sideswiping a little bit some of the harder geopolitical issues. I think all of us have been glued to our phones in the morning, and probably many of you can speak in more detail than I can even about how it's playing out in the Arab region. But I think what we notice, and I'll end on this, as International Medical Corps, we are the frontline responders of some of the world's worst climate fuel disasters. We show up and we watch and we are witness to what happens when there's inaction, and we see that. And but we also see the collective power of being resilient. Sorry, I'll use that, of being resilient, of fighting back, of finding solutions and making sure that doesn't happen again. We've had many people on this call be supporters of our work, and we cannot thank you enough. And let's keep working together. We will find those examples. We'll elevate those examples through our network, figure out how we can bring them to Brazil and COP30 and beyond. And I think that's our goal here. And what a beautiful thing you've created. Congratulations. And thank you for allowing us to be a part of this network.
Thank you so much, Deepti. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, I think also the work that you guys are doing has been so important also in obviously in the response and all of that, in kind of in all the various different contexts that you work in, but as it relates to the climate issue, is how to constantly remind. I mean, International Medical Corps works in the humanitarian sector. That's a very immediate, urgent type of response. But having you guys as part of the working group on climate shows us how you can't ignore the cross-cutting intersections. You just can't. And there's a domino effect to every single thing that we do, and there's a reason for why highlighting the climate issue and putting it front and center in everything that we've done over, and everything that we're going to be doing as part of this sector and part of how this sector evolves, how critical it is, but then also to remind us that in this juncture that we're sort of facing in the sector, with all the upheaval and all the chaos that's going on, partly due to geopolitical crisis, partly due to the climate crisis, partly due to all, is that, again, none of this can be done alone. None of this can be done in silos. And I know these are words that we keep hearing over and over and over again, but we can't have more proof. We can't have more proof of how important these collectives are, these collaborations are. So thank you so much. So we've answered a couple of questions. Some people have been typing some answers to some of the questions. But there is a question here that I'd like to ask from Nejma. And just a little fun fact, Nejma and I know each other from when we were 3 years old. I haven't seen her in probably 30 years. And so I just love the fact that, Nejma, that you're on this with us, and that you're on this webinar and asking a question. So hi, Nejma. But anyway, the question is addressed to Aditi, but then also I'll open it up to everyone else, where she's saying, the point on impact and what does that look like is extremely important. Working with cross-cutting issues like climate change is extremely difficult to mainstream and to prioritize given the challenges that we face in the MENA region. So localization of how we address climate and just transitions is a critical part of that solution, particularly with respect to developing tools for measurement and accountability that work for us, but also for accountability to global actors. And as we mentioned with Sawira's foundation, internal accountability. So within Pillar 7, to what extent has the Arab Philanthropy Commitment on Climate Change developed a framework to ensure such accountability? And is there a toolkit that we can use to support this application? So I'm going to ask if Wings and Walid can maybe answer that question, because you guys have worked most intensely on this. Do we have plans for a more concerted kind of place where everyone can go to find this toolkit?
I can start if that helps.
Please.
Pillar 7 is really important for us as a commitment, as a movement, to understand once signatories have signed up, how we actually showing progress and action. And it's really great to see that there is a framework that's been developed at the national commitment host level. And so if you look at the UK, for instance, they're in their 4th year of reporting on the progress of the commitment. Last year was the first year that we did the first international climate commitment. The findings and insights will be launched in a month's time, so it'll be great to read. And what was interesting to see is that 3/4 of the signatories, and we had a 70% response rate, are reviewing existing or creating new programs. But 1/3 of the respondents said that one of their biggest challenges was integration, which I think, Maze, you mentioned at the start. So there is insight that we're developing right now. And what we've done is that these different transparency approaches build off each other. And the goal is that by the end of this year, we develop a global transparency framework so that we can collectively talk about the impact and the progress, rather, that we are creating moving forward. So I'm hoping that that will provide a foundation for the Arab commitment, but more importantly, it also integrates the insights and the feedback and the way organizations are already mapping their progress. How can we make it more robust and better? And on the topic of case studies, we have developed an initial round of 22 case studies, a couple from the Arab region, and we would love to do more, but I'll share links to this in the chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I'm very dangerously close to taking us way over time, and I'm not going to do that. But I will say that just the amount of participation, the number of participants, the number of speakers, the engagement, the questions, all of that prove that there is not only a need for this conversation, but clearly a need for us to have another webinar where we explore some of these questions a little bit more in depth. So what I'm going to commit to, and I know when he's going to kill me for this, but it's okay. I'm going to commit to that we will take the questions that were that required much more thought, and build a second session around them and launch that session possibly during Ramadan, when maybe things are a bit quieter and people can join before iftar, after iftar, and we can talk a little bit about this, or maybe after Eid, whatever. But at some point we will get to those questions, because number one, I think they're important enough that we need a little bit more time to digest them and to come back to you with thoughtful answers. So I'm specifically talking about the questions that Natasha asked, again, the question that Nejma asked, and then I think there's one more person, Remy, I think that's how you pronounce it, also asked. So I want to get back to that. And I also want, to let you all go, because it's already been an hour and a half and 6 minutes. So first of all, just thank you so much for everyone who joined, for all of the speakers. You are our partners. You are invaluable to this process, and quite frankly, invaluable to the sector. And again, in a moment of time where just everything feels so hopeless, I'm so warmed and just encouraged and feel so lucky that we have all of you with us and on board with us and helping us. And, you know, our commitment is to continue to power through, empower, enhance, enable, support, you know, be here to answer to whatever the needs of our network is and whatever the needs of our sector is. We're going to do a follow-up with you in writing, so I'm not going to go through all of this again. You've gotten in the notes, in the comments, all of the resources that you can access, and we'll touch base when this goes back on our YouTube channel so that you can rewatch it, share it with your friends and with your colleagues, and we'll share more resources. Thank you, everybody, so much. Walid, Nihal, the entire AFF team, you guys are incredible. Wings, everybody, incredible. Thank you so, so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Naila. Bye.